All right, June 30th, ban announcement. I got a lot to talk about. I'll first go over historic, and then we'll jump to timeless. So if you're only timeless player, you can skip over. So if you scroll down, oh, that's actually kind of funny. Pioneer Best of One, Tipple's Trickery is banned. Here it is, historic, counterspell unbanned. So this is actually kind of huge. At the same time, not really. So, in my opinion, Counterspell getting unbanned in Historic is a pretty good change, but it's not really gonna do anything. But nonetheless, it's still a step in the right direction because so currently Historic is plagued with powerful things happening, but we don't have any good answers. So that is the biggest problem with Historic at the moment, which brings to my next point. The most popular deck in Historic didn't get hit. This is like the Crucia situation at the moment, right? The card just never gets hit. So the most popular deck at the moment in Historic happens to be Sorin. Sorin has been plaguing Historic for quite a while now, ever since Alenda. And it was just bound to happen, honestly, because with cards like Sorin, it's basically a one-sided show and tell, right? So as more powerful vampire gets introduced, the power level of Sorin is just gonna go up and up and up, and until the format can't really handle it. We're kind of at that situation. The Alenda is just too powerful, especially with the format. Now you could say maybe like, Alchemy bad, but this is gonna just happen no matter what. Sorin is just bad news. It was going to happen no matter what, because with the new sets constantly being released, they are going to introduce a powerful vampire no matter what. This was going to happen no matter what. But the fact that the most powerful deck didn't even get hit, which has been the most powerful for who knows how long, this is literally the Crucio situation. And like I said, because the answers are so bad, unlike Timeless, where you have Source to cleanly answer Saint Alenda or Solitude, like an 8 mana card coming down on turn 3 is too much for Historic to handle, and you have to opt into something like a Fragment Reality. It just feels really bad to use on Saint Alenda, and you could just lose the game by playing out a Fragment Reality on Saint Alenda as well, because they could just cascade into something like a Belmerk or even a Frog can be devastating, right? So this is really bad. I do appreciate Counterspell being unbanned for that purpose, so that now you have a clean 2-mana answer to Sorin coming down. But the reality is, this is not going to change anything because they can just play Thoughtseize into a Sorin. And not to mention, the Counterspell doesn't do anything against second most popular deck, which is the Eldrazi's. If you play the latter, there's so many Sorin decks, there's so many Eldrazi decks, and that's because the answer is really bad. The answers that we have in Historic are really bad. So if you play something like a Counterspell against Eldrazi decks, that's not gonna really work out for you because every card that they cast are on cast effects. And speaking of Eldrazi's, another card that's I don't think is very healthy is Ugin's Lab, because they want the Historic to be non-fetchless format with bad removal spells. We don't even have Blood Moon as a result of having no fetch lands, but they want like soul lands. So no Blood Moons, no good interaction spells, but they want soul lands in the format, which is basically what Ugin's Lab is. And again, because of that, that's exactly what's happening. Because the answers are so bad, the threats are just running loose, and they can just put down the biggest threats possible. So yeah, I don't think the counter spells is gonna do anything. It's a step in the right direction because it's currently we don't have any like 2-mana counters at the moment. Like I'm not going to count like Remand and stuff like that. Even Drown in the Log is kind of useless at the moment because of Psychic Frog. Because in response to using the Drown in the Log, you can just respond with a Psychic Frog to exile everything. It's a welcome addition. It's just not going to really impact the format at all, and it's still going to, I feel like, continue to be Sorin and Eldrazi format. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Historic. I think this format's been a little bit cooked too long. Now it's a little bit burnt. So I'm kind of disappointed to see like no bans in Historic. I think Historic definitely deserves it after so long. It's it's been a year since anything happened. So let's look at their reasoning. Historic had a noticeable shift in power level over the last few years with the release of Modern Horizons 3 and powerful additions from the bonus sheets. Our vision for the Historic is deck builder's paradise where any favorite deck can be viable for play. The thing is, to some extent, because of mono green, you can't really play mid-range. So you have to play something like a Sorin deck, which is technically mid-range, but it's a little bit cheating, right? You're cheating out a 8 mana card into play, which like 99% of the decks can't really handle it. We have been curating the format carefully to make sure no single strategy overwhelms the format, except the Sorin does at the moment. For example, we successfully slowed down the white-red energy package so it fits in with where we want Historic's power level to be. Okay, that's fair. This is fair, but it's been such a long time ever since this change. And not to mention, it's a lot easier to deal with a 1 mana card compared to an 8 mana card like Alenda or Vein Ripper, especially in a format with all the removal spells being nerfed. So we limit free spells and land destruction so that players have time and resources to play their cards. The thing is, there is no time. The thing is, there is no time. No, there is no time. Like, where's the time? People are ramping with soul lands like Ugin's Lab or just winning on turn 3. So for some time now, we have noticed that creature combos and enchantment strategies have been consistent and dominant in the format. This is basically talking about the Goblin Bombardment decks. We want to give control players a few more tools to react to the disruptive tempo of these aggro and mid-range decks. The thing is, they could already do that. Aggro and mid-range are not the problem. I can understand for mid-range decks because if you want to pair the Sorin decks into a mid-range deck. Aggro, I feel like you could already kind of do that because of Wrath of the Skies. While the power level of the creature-based decks have grown, the control has fallen a bit. Kind of makes sense because like things like Drown of the Lock doesn't even work anymore because of Psychic Frog. Therefore, we believe it's time for counter spells to be unbanned in the Historic. I agree. This classic control staple is well positioned to keep the format fair and balanced across archetypes by slowing down the creatures, filling up the battlefield. We'll see about that. The thing is, the creature decks are not the most prominent in Historic at the moment. It's even mid-range strategies like Sorin is basically kind of a combo deck with things like Ulamog and stuff. So I feel like they're behind, right? They're a bit behind by maybe like 6 months. I feel like this should have happened 6 months ago, and we should have had a change to Sorin and Ugin's Lab like right now. And with the counter spell being unbanned, it would have been nice if they like unbanned a reasonable answer. Like for example, I think one card that comes to mind is maybe Solitude, because even though Solitude is a free mana card, you are going down on the card. It's still pretty bad if they like Sorin into Elenda. So I feel like it's kind of fair. Like I said, I think they're just a bit behind in time when it comes to Historic. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, Historic, a little bit cooked at the moment, but hopefully in the future, they'll do something about the Sorin. They'll do something about Ugin's Lab. I don't think with their vision of a Historic with limited amount of answers should be able to cheat out powerful cards like as early as turn 2 and 3 because the answers just don't follow, right? The answers just don't follow to be able to answer these threats. And the fact that they want to limit the like free spells and land destructions, well, that's fine and all, but you also allow things like soul lands in the game, which is very problematic for the format, in my opinion. So that is my 2 cents with Historic. So let's move on to Timeless, because I think Timeless is a little bit more interesting. So, Timeless, no changes. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. In my honest opinion, I think Timeless is perfect, with the exception of Dark Ritual. But the Dark Ritual decks aren't the most powerful decks. Plus, they're a little bit inconsistent when it comes to like ranking up. Sometimes it's also a little bit frustrating to play because of inconsistency, and you can definitely lose to your own mulligans. So it's not the most popular deck. So although it does lead to some non-games, which, I do feel like sometimes why am I even playing this game? But because of the inconsistency and also like between going first and second, even if they do have a Dark Ritual combo, depending on whether or not they go second, they might still lose the game as a result. So because of that, I do think, so even though it's bit annoying to play against, but I do feel like in terms of power level against everything else, I think it's pretty consistent. So no changes to Timeless. I think that's completely fair, except I do think there is a shift at the moment. I do think there is a shift. We have been getting slowly and progressively getting more and more cards that favor show and tell. So for example, so we got Chrome Mox, which favored combo decks, and later we got Rakshasa's Bargain, which is, I don't even know, like this card is absolutely disgusting, by the way, which gave boost to show and tell. And now we lost one thing, one edge that we had against the show and tell deck, which was the Flare of Denial version of the deck that was very good against combo decks. With the release of Final Fantasy Z, we got this card called Carpet of Flowers, which makes this matchup very tricky. Very tricky. So the Esper Temple list has to adjust to this and then play things like Fragment Reality in the sideboard. But like I said, Show and Tell has been getting a lot of good stuff recently. And that is why the Show and Tell, which was kind of falling in favor, is now staying dominant. Not too dominant to the extent that like other decks can't really win against them, but it is definitely tipping the scales at the moment. So let's take a look at what they said. The Timeless metagame has continued to hold the best decks in check with slight shifts in top decks since the emergence of Goblin Charbelcher combo. This was so long ago. Other decks have influenced more hand disruptions and counter spells in their main decks to delay an early game win, which makes sense because now we got things like Energyless running even like Thoughtseizes, and we have Esper Frog decks that are playing Turtle plus Flare of Denial. And so Mardu Energy, Shift and Tell, and Psychic Frog Temple decks all make up some of the most powerful games of Magic you can play anywhere. I don't know why they said Shift and Tell. It should be Show and Tell. I do believe Timeless is kind of like a 3-deck format. We have the Trinity, the Energy, and the Show and Tell, and the Esper Temple deck. They make up majority of your Timeless games, right? And then you have some rogue decks that can also kind of perform to beat these 3 decks. And I think that's a pretty good system at the moment. Timeless is designed to be a stable format, so we expect changes from banned and restricted updates to be rare, fair. We do expect Timeless to continue to evolve this year through additional reprint cards, coming to MTG Arena, in Anthology releases, and special guest cards. So, continue to evolve this year. What does that even mean? So are we going to expect an anthology this year? If so, that is so hype. That is so hype. So a lot of people have been very disappointed that we didn't get Force of Negation for Final Fantasy set because it was a Japanese box topper, basically. So we didn't get that card, and a lot of people are showing disappointment, right? And I'm pretty sure they also know as well. So there's a good chance we might be seeing some very good reprints, new to Magic Arena, releasing through Anthology. Hopefully this year. I hope this means this year. Continue to evolve this year. I don't have much hopes for special guest cards, by the way, because special guest cards, they're not really targeted towards Timeless. They're just random cards for a paper. But the people that are writing this must know what the special guest cards are because they have to deal with this anthology release. So I think this is a pretty exciting news, in my opinion. I think Timeless currently is almost perfect. Like, at least more than Historic for sure. I am very disappointed with Historic at the moment. But Timeless right now, right, if you play any of the tier 1 decks, or even tier 3, like some of the tier 3 decks that you can play in Timeless, you're gonna have a good time. Except maybe in Best of 1, but again, everything that I say, I'm only talking about Best of 3 with proper sideboard cards because you can't expect to have a fun time in the older the format gets with no sideboard cards. If you've never played Best of 3, I suggest you doing so because it'll basically open a new door. it is a completely different format compared to the best of one. And yes, you're still gonna get those non-games here and there in Timeless, even in best of three. At least you have a chance of coming back with some cyber cards. So that's kind of where I'm at with Timeless. I think Timeless is currently almost perfect. It's a little bit stale though, I won't lie. So I think this line is a very exciting news for Timeless. But at the same time, I have a bad feeling about the next set because it says continue to evolve this year with the reprints coming to MTG Arena in Anthology and special guest cards. So does that mean the Edge of Eternity, the lands bonus sheet aren't going to become a staple in Timeless? Right? There's a lot to actually uncover here, but I mean they could have just missed it. Who knows? So we'll have to see how Timeless changes this year. So with that said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye bye.